Bits of Blender is 17 years old today. For our anniversary, we're going to do a tour of Blender. All right, let's begin our tour of Blender. We're going to make a vase, a simple vase, and animate it. So we start out, we're in object mode. We'll switch over to edit mode. We could hit tab to enter and exit edit mode when we're in the 3D editor. So 3D viewport, which is one of the editors. Let's hit X to delete the vertices, 1 on the number pad to view front orthographic. Right now we're in the layout workspace. Workspaces are a convenience, and you can create your own workspaces and configure them. Right now layout is like we're laying out our scene. So for example, I'm going to, while I'm still in edit mode for that object, I'm going to add some vertices for it. Control right click and continue to control right click to draw the profile of the vase. This last point, I could hit N and set it exactly where I want, which is at origin. But what I'm going to do instead is do Shift S, selection to cursor, and then using B to get the selection marquee, I'm going to select both of these and then change our pivot point to the 3D cursor, which is right there, and do S for scale, Z for the Z axis, 0 for the amount of scale. Now it's a nice flat bottom for our base. I'll select all, and I'm going to spin it. I'll middle mouse button to give a more dramatic view here as we spin it. And I can bring that all the way around. Now that is not done. I'm going to finish it here, where I'll set it to 16. $36. And importantly, we want to flip normals, because if we were to look at the normals right now, you can see, let's look on the inside, see those little blue lines that I just enabled? Well, that's showing which way those faces are facing. So what I want to do is make sure flip normals is on. Close that out. And now our faces are facing out. Let's turn that off again. So since we're in layout, let's tab to go back to object mode. 0 on the number pad to view through the camera. And let's say we like the camera where it is right now. Let's position this better by sizing it down. Now you can see I made the transformation. Let's go ahead and apply the transformation with a Control A. We'll just say all transformations, even though we just did scale. I'm going to edit mode again, selecting all, and I'm going to do a Control F just to smooth those faces. You can see now it's nice and smooth. If we were to go to the modeling workspace, you would see it get rid of some of our stuff like the timeline, give us a little bit more room, and automatically put us in edit mode. Like I said, these are conveniences. Let's go over to sculpting next. In sculpting, we can model our geometry by using brushes. So for example, I've got the draw brush right now. If I just start drawing on our object, it's going to be adding to it. I'm going to undo that. If I did control while having draw, it's pushing it in, doing the opposite of what it was a moment ago. I can change my brush size with hitting the F key. And but we don't have a lot of geometry to play with here yet. So I'm going to go over to our modifiers, and our modifiers are non-destructive, at least until you apply them. And under generate, I'm going to say, let's do a multi-resolution and subdivide, 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 subdivide. So now we have a nice high-res vase that we can work with. I'm just hitting plus on the number pad to zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to shrink my brush down. Switch to the crease sharp. Draw a nice logo on this vase. This is nice, but it's very high resolution. So what we can do is we can bake it onto a normal map of the lower resolution object. Of course, we have to set that up. So a couple things. There's a couple steps here. I'm going over now to the UV editing workspace because we'll need a UV map. If I were to do unwrap here, notice we're in edit mode. It automatically put us there. I type U to unwrap. And our map, it doesn't look super useful. I could undo. Well, I'm not going to undo. I'm just going to do a new one. Smart Project does a really nice job of taking it apart. And another thing you could do is we'll do an Alt left click on these edges to select all of them and do a Control E, bring up our edge menu, do mark seam to give a little more information when we unwrap. So it's like if we had a scissors and we're cutting these apart to make this thing flat. And obviously you could cut as many seams as you want, however you think is appropriate. So now when I unwrap it with this first one, or any of the first three, you'll see this is a little bit better than the first thing we saw, right? So, and I'm going to create an image over here. New image. I'm going to call it normal. And let's give something like the UV grid. That's hard to see, right? But it's okay because we're going to overwrite it. I just want something that's easy to see that we've overwritten it. So step one was our UV map. Now the next step is under shading here. This is all zoomed in. I don't know why it came this way with 4:4, but you can hit the decimal point on the number pad to show all and zoom out. Let's do a Shift A texture, image texture. And now I'm going to select our normal map, and I want to see it over here too. So I'm going to say, let's bring the normal over here. View this guy. So it's important that this is active before we bake this texture onto it. I also want to set the color space to non-color. And we need to switch to cycles. So go to our render properties. These are all properties panels. Go to the render properties, cycles, find bake, select bake from multi-res, and click bake. And there you see, there's our beautiful logo that we just added. Now I can connect this up, but I don't want to connect it up to the color. I'm going to do a Shift A, and I'll just search, and I'll say normal, and I want the normal map. And I'm going to bring that in here. G to go to move things. So color to color, normal to normal. And now you can see, hopefully, our beautiful logo. You can see our vase is looking a little chunky now that it's back to its low resolution self. What I'm going to do now is we're done with this multi-res. I'll go ahead and add a subdivision surface. Maybe we'll just bump that up to the same, so that's how it'll render. So we've got a nice smooth vase. I'm going to hit save. I had already saved this document at the beginning, so I'm just saving as we're moving along. Now, it's nice. We could change the color here. That's kind of cool. And we can change how shiny it is, like how metallic. Completely metallic, that's hard to tell without other stuff in the scene to reflect. But what we can also do is add another texture map. So I'm just gonna select this, Shift D. This one, it's not gonna be normal. What I can do is I can make another texture right here, and I'll call it, this is gonna be our color map. And this time, let's select the color grid, just for fun. New image. This will be sRGB. And one thing, you know what? Before we connect this up, just as an important reminder, let's go back to UV editing where we can see things. See how the image has an asterisk? That means it hasn't been saved. When I save my Blender project, it's not automatically saving images that are linked to it. So I can do an Alt S. Notice that was Alt S, save. And then my other image, color, I'm going to do an Alt S, save. So now there's not an asterisk there. You could come under the menu here and do save as well. And notice I'm saying Alt, or on the Mac, Option S, as opposed to your Command S, which is, when we're doing this here. All right, back to shading. So I've got my color map. It's set to sRGB. I could just connect it right on there. And now we've got a beautiful map with our logo. So let's go ahead and go to the animation workspace. I'm going to hit the decimal point on the number pad and 1 on the number pad. So we're looking at it from the front orthographic again. And Shift A to add an armature. Now I can't see it. I could use X-ray. X-ray is handy because you can see through objects, even if they're deselected. And you can click through an object by click and continuing to click. You can get that object. See, there we go. But I prefer to come under here under viewport display. So let me make sure that the armature is selected. That's another way to select things, is through our outliner. And we've got our armature selected. And I want to select, I could select the object instead of its viewport display, which I was starting to do. But really, for the armature, I'm doing this for the data object here to say I want it to view in front, and I have the option of names plural for the bones. So let's look at this from the front again. Tab into edit mode, move along the Z axis, hit E to extrude, Z to constrain it to Z, E, Z. Easy. And position your bones, and then hit Tab to go back to object mode, select your vase, then shift select your bones. So you can see our bones are selected, but they're the active object because they're the light orange color, and the dark orange color is also selected. It's just not the active object. So let's do Control P, and we're parenting the vase to the armature. We're going to set automatic weights. When we parented, it's like the cube disappeared, but it didn't really. it's in here. The cube object is now a child object of the armature. Let's click the armature and we'll switch to pose mode. We can also do Control Tab. Control Tab brings us in and out of pose mode for bones. See how the bones are bone, bone 01, bone 02. We could rename them, but we're not going to for this. If we go back to object mode and we select the vase, you can see on our mesh, the data object for our vase. In fact, maybe we'll call that vase for the object. You can see it created vertex groups that are associated with each of these bones by name. So let's do a Control Tab and check if the weights worked. Looks like they worked. And now we can start our animation. So I'm going to start in this initial position, and I'm going to hit I to insert a keyframe. And you'll see not only did it create a keyframe for that bone, but it created this action. Actions are reusable in the nonlinear animation editor. So we've keyed this here, and now let's just middle mouse button control, click and drag to now shift and middle mouse button and click and drag. So let's move ahead in time, and I'm going to shift B on this and draw a rectangle to zoom in on our timeline. And let's say we want to move, let's not worry about it yet. So we're just going to set this to 10, hit G to move. We'll pick a nice spot like here, hit I, insert another keyframe. Let's bump over to 20, come over to like here, I to keyframe. Let's scrub to see, do we like it? Yes, it's beautiful. We could let's end this here at 22 for the moment, and hit spacebar and just watch it. And it's a little slow, so let's move our timeline to where we want to scale from, which is frame 1. Let's select all with hitting A, S to scale. Let's just scale this down a little bit. Watch that. That's a little bit better. Maybe we could scale a little bit more. And let's see. Let's set this guy, make them evenly apart so that this is at, let's say 11, and this is at 6. So add 5, add 5. That's pretty good. We'll save that. And now we could go ahead and render it, but before we render it, let's make the scene a little bit more interesting. And for that, I'm just going to go to Layout and go back to frame 1. Shift A, add a mesh, a plane, scale, let's say 5 times. And select the camera, G to move. Let's just see how that looks. And then we can, we're still on cycles. Let's switch over to Eevee. It's quite a bit faster, especially since we're going to animate this. Let's grab our light and go along the Z. Just bring that down a little bit. And in fact, Control, Option, Q. Let's zoom out. We see our light is there. Maybe it would be nicer to have it about here. So we're looking at top orthographic front, right, and the camera. Let me hit N to hide that. This is a handy space to jump to. Maybe I'll do a Shift D on the light and I'll just light up our scene a little bit more. But for this second one, let's go to the light, turn off shadow, maybe bump it down a little bit. Let's say 700. And now we've made the scene more interesting. We could render this. We could do under render. Under render, we can say render image. See our beautiful image. But let's visit, how about geometry nodes? I'm going to select this guy, say new, and what I want to do is I'm going to turn this guy into a bunch of like, let's say 4 tiles. So here, since I know I want to subdivide it, I'm going to say subdivide mesh. Oops. Select all. Decimal point. So we subdivided it. It's hard to tell. Let's go into edit mode and let's apply the node so we can see it. And let's bump it up a little bit more. Still not seeing it. We don't need that. Let's come over to, there we go. That's nice in object mode so we can see all the faces that we're creating. That looks like a good tile size. Add way to split these up. And then let's see, you know what? I'm going to do a scale elements. We'll put that at like, say, 0.9 for starters. So now we've scaled them, and now they're still very flat. Let's extrude them. It's extruding them a little too much. So let's say 0.1. It's still a lot. Let's say 0.01. And that's a little bit better. But what we could do is instead of having them be quite so perfect, let's add some randomness in here, which would be a pain to do. The things we've done so far would be fairly easy to do in the interface, except this is non-destructive. We can still just have a plane there, similar to modifiers. What I want to do is I want to do some randomness. Let's do that. And now that looks kind of interesting. But too much. Remember the discombobulator? Let's see, let's do 0.1 again. Do a range to 0.12. Maybe the 0.01 to 0.012. So now we've got these tiles that are imperfectly laid down. They're only slightly off. Maybe we'll add another plane. Let's go back to layout. And do a Shift A, mesh, plane. Scale this up 5 times. Enter. Control A to apply transformations. And now we've got like the beginnings of our grout. Let's do Control Option Q to get back out of that. We could do a Control Space to give us even more room in our interface. Let's look at it from the front. Let's see how close we are. So we can move that up a little bit along the Z, maybe. And let's select both of these and move them down along the Z, just so they're closer to the floor. Let's look through the camera and do our Control Space again to get back. So this guy, it would be easier if we remember this is the grout. And that was the mesh object, the mesh data. Let's call the object grout. And the other plane, let's call that tiles. And we can do the same for its object. We do it here too. Let's give them some. Let's give some color and some texture. So I'm going to select the tiles. Go to my materials. Make a new material. Let's change the color. Give me a nice terracotta color. Make them a lot more rough. Maybe just a tiny bit of metallic. Why don't we do something interesting in our shading, like Shift A. Let's search for some noise. And add that to a bump. So our noise, we can connect this factor to the height and then output a normal. And you can see it's affecting it there, but we need to shrink this down by increasing this number. So let's bump it up to 1,000. And that's already pretty good. Let's look at that. Might be a little strong, so we can just dial that back. However much you think is appropriate for your tile. And honestly, I think the grout should have something similar. Maybe this, let's lower this a little bit. Let's see how 800 looks. And let's reduce that strength a little bit. But then let's do something similar on the grout. And I'm gonna say this is totally rough. And let's add the same thing. There's our bump. And search, let's go to our noise. Isn't it nice that it's in the order that we applied them? Credit to whoever put that in there. So let's give this guy like 1,000. And that too is a little dark. Let's do 0.7. 0.5. It's not bad. In fact, I wanted even more. Let's go 1,200, real small. So there, that's kind of neat. And you can see, again, our grout, if we were to move it up and down, See how some of these are a little bit lower than others? That's really just what I want to share. But I do want to move it up just a tiny bit. And to move things slower, just hold the shift key and move in smaller increments. All right, so now we've got our vase moving on our tiles. All right, you know what? Let's add to the scene just a little bit more. How if we add a cube? Let's scale it up. Do 5 times again. Enter edit mode. And then let's switch over to selecting faces. X, delete the face. X, delete the face. And you can switch between face, edge, and vertices here. Let's look through the camera. Let's see how that looks. That looks all right. Maybe we could give a little tint to this wall. Maybe just slightly warmer. How about if we had some other vases? Select our vase. Let's do a Shift D to duplicate, and then do Shift Z to keep it at the same Z location, but we're changing its, its X and Y. And now, let's say this background vase is, we duplicated it, so it's different mesh data, but now let's do an Alt D. So this guy really just references the same data as the other one. Shift Z. We'll put that back into there. Shift Alt D. Shift Z. In fact, let's do our Control Option Q. Select all with A. Just to look at everything. Nothing's, make sure I didn't make them overlapping or anything. Control Option Q again. And let's Shift B to zoom in. All right, so let's change this material. How about if we just disconnect this guy and create a new one, and we'll just sort of keep them all the same warm tone that we're doing the rest of the room. Make them pretty rough. They're not going to be something to draw your eye. Let's look through the camera. I think I like these. Here, let's go back to start. Oh, look what's happening. I went back to the start frame. Let's play it. That's really not what I want. So let's look at these cubes. They are have the same parent. So I'm going to select these and do an Alt P to clear parent. And now you'll see they're no longer under the armature. They don't have that parent anymore, but I am suspicious. First, let's move them. G, and then Shift Z again. Let's look at our modifiers. Make sure we got rid of. All right, good job, Blender. Blender got rid of the armature modifier when I cleared the parent. So this, I don't like that guy being cut off so much. Now I'm just fussing. So maybe I can do a couple more Alt-D. I'll put him way back in the corner. Alt-D. And if we were to look at these, let's look at our original base. Look at these. That's face 01. That's face 01. So these different objects are, when I duplicated, it did duplicate the mesh, which is what I wanted. And then when I did the Alt-D, it just duplicated the objects. So each one of these in the background is pointing to the same mesh. And hit save. Now let's try and give a render. Let's check our render settings. We've got EV, and right now we're at the default for number of samples, 64 samples. What if I do this for our output? Let's do it at half size initially, so it'll be a little faster. We'll give it a render with Control F12. We'll start pounding that out. Let's move the camera a little bit, just so it's on. And make sure we're staying in. That looks good. So once we've rendered these out, where are they? Well, right now they're at the root of your drive in the TMP folder. So let's change that output to // which is the folder that this Blender file is in. We'll call it renders, and add a slash at the end. If we don't add the slash, then it's just going to prefix the frame number with whatever you prefix it with. Now it'll render to our renders folder, and what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and stop, and I'll render the whole thing at a higher res. Now we have these high-res renders. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene. It's an empty scene. And I'm going to create a new workspace, adding one that's pre-existing, the video editing. I'm going to pin it to this scene. I'm going to rename the scene video editing. And now I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to add an image sequence. I'm going to go in here and add these guys. Make sure this is different render settings, so I'm going to make sure that this is got the same endpoint as the other one. So now I'm just looking at those renders. What I can do is say, let's take all those renders and aggregate them onto a, let's say, a QuickTime movie. We can accept that. Render it. Which, that looks pretty nice. What that did was it created a QuickTime movie on my drive now. And one thing I didn't show you yet is some compositing. Let's say that we did all this beautiful work with coloring. Let's go back to our regular scene, use nodes, and let's do a quick render. All right. I'm going to add a viewer. There we go. So let's say we've got this beautiful render, and we want to just adjust the colors a little bit easily. What we can do is, let's say we want to adjust the hue. We'll just connect that guy. So now, well, and I'm just adjusting the hue for the whole scene. But it's nice that I can just come in here, and there's all sorts of things you could do with the compositor. If you've decided to use the compositor nodes, when you go to output in your post-processing, you have that selected, it will use that. If you deselect that, then it'll ignore that. And same thing if there's a sequencer. Now in this scene, there's not a sequencer, but in the new scene, we did use the sequencer. And you can see each time it renders, it applies the compositor afterwards, thus post-processing. Now, when we go back to our video editing scene, what I want to do is I want to bring in the new ones, but it's automatically rereading them. I don't know why it's not reading that one in. But if there was any doubt, I could create a new strip pretty easily. I could also point it to different data files here. I could just re-import everything here again. You know, this is where you're supposed to be pointing to. There's all happy again. And I can render out my movie now. And that was a quick tour of Blender. You know what? Because I just can't help myself. You could also do some scripting here too by creating a new file, import BPY, and that's the Blender Python. That's your mnemonic. But what would you do? I mean, you'd be looking for a lot of things, but sometimes something simple to do. Of course, I did that in video editing, which I really wanted to do it over here. Anytime that we're doing some actions, we could, let me split the space, switch this to info. Anytime we're like moving something or scaling something, I tabbed in and you can see I toggled edit mode. You can select one of these lines and copy it, bring it in here and paste it. And let me get out of edit mode here, maybe zoom in a little bit better so you can see. And I can run this script. Just run it twice. So there it toggled in and out. Not so interesting, but still, the fact that you can automate simple operations that you can see that transform. I can copy that in there. Copy. Let's get rid of this. Got our big transform. Let me undo that. And then come back here and paste that. So I've got this, and I can just run that script. Click this guy, run that script, run that script. There we go. So that's your tour. So thank you again for watching. If you made it this far, you could continue to finesse this. It's hard to resist tweaking the animation infinitely or the materials. I appreciate you watching Bits of Blenders over these last 17 years. It's been a lot of fun. I wish my partner, my son, Richard, could have been for this 17th anniversary. But I'll